Welcome to the Sports Lounge College Football Preview Edition, the 80th edition. I'm Travis Kriens. We got Wyatt Rogan, camp number 55. We got the Black Box, known as David Schottenkirk. We got Marcus Draxler. We got Charlie Hildebrand. Maybe we'll have one more, we'll see. But this is the big college football preview. This is our version of the British Open major-wise, you could say. Maybe the second biggest show of the year. So plenty of conferences. Only going to do the top 5 conferences. Thank God there's no Big East or AAC that we have to talk about and go through for 10, 15 minutes. So that's nice. So it's just the Big 5 now since they've decided that they're the big show in town. First year of the new playoff. You had 2 more teams to the national title mix. A 4-game playoff. Show of hands. Who likes the playoff? Marcus Draxler likes the playoff.
I'm going to do it with the I do and I don't at the same time. More so do than don't, though.
I mean, the one thing I'm quickly learning, because I did scroll down some notes, is how hard it is to pick the 4 teams that you think are going to be in this playoff, as opposed to the 2 teams that you think will be in the national championship. I feel like that was easier, even though I'm sure my picks last year were wrong. So I think that it just becomes that much more difficult. It's like trying to pick the whole NCAA basketball field at the beginning of the season. Yeah, when we get to the end of the year and you ask me which 4 teams are going to be in the playoff, 30 minutes before they make the announcement, I'll be able to tell you probably. But right now, I have a hard time narrowing it down from 10 teams or so.
Just statistically speaking, you got a better chance of getting 1 or 2 in this tournament, though.
Well, yeah.
These are the top 2 teams. They got to go undefeated probably to reach the title game. And where you can have an Oregon who loses 1 game every year, it seems like, to Stanford, or you have an Oklahoma who always disappoints. They can still lose 1 game. And earlier in the year, they lost. They're probably done. Here, it's only 4. It's only 2 more spots. But here, at least you can say, well, if they win out, they can still get in there 11-1, 12-1.
I feel pretty confident that Florida State can make the playoff, even if
they get 1 loss.
Even if they have 1 loss, yeah. So I mean, that would be the one team that I would say I feel confident that they can make the playoff.
Ironically, Florida State would have to pull a Clemson to not make the playoffs, I think, this year.
That hurts. Make a ruling. We were on Clemson for 3 years. Last 3 years we've been on Clemson. They've made a couple of Orange Bowls, I believe.
Yep.
They won 1. They did well. Didn't reach the title game. A couple of BCS Bowls, but I don't know if you want to retire Clemson. Clemson will always have a spot. We'll always hang the banner Clemson and fly it. But proposal to maybe have a new team, since Clemson, they've reached the apex. 2 BCS Bowls, never done that before. Is there a new team on the horizon that the Sports Lounge can pick up here?
Well, I don't want to spoil it yet, but I do have an ACC replacement for Clemson that I think will be good this year.
Better not be Duke. I'll punch you in the face.
It's not Duke. It's not Duke. Do you want me to get into it now, or should we wait till we get to that conference?
Just give a preview to whet the appetite.
Okay, they are Duke's rival, number 1 rival.
Oh boy,
Carolina,
North Carolina. I mean, I'll say that they have a lot of talent. Whether or not they turn that into something, I mean, that fits our Clemson profile. They have a unique color, being the light blue, and their coach Larry Fedora, 3rd year, usually a 3rd year of a coach, you make leaps and bounds. I mean, I don't think they're going to win the ACC. I don't think they may not even make a BCS game. I'm going to keep calling them BCS games because that seems to still sum it up. But I don't think double-digit wins is out of the question. They don't play Florida State this year.
I've got a team that's going to get mentioned here fairly early since we start with the SEC that I think's on the precipice of a Clemson run. They've never made a BCS game. They've been close a couple times, but a team that has a legitimate shot at a national title that I'll mention here in a little bit. So we have the 14
we might be simpatico with that one.
I think so.
No, but I think there's a good chance we're both thinking of the same team there in the SEC.
You correctly guessed my shocker of a team, so that was very good. I don't think nobody else would have gotten that. I have a team later on that I think could go undefeated or maybe even 12-1. It's not currently ranked. I don't even think they're receiving votes. So we'll get into that later on. I expect this playoff to be very exciting. A lot of good games coming from this. A lot more excitement during the year, and I think it makes the bowl games more important. I expect this thing to be to at least double in the next 10 years, even though the contract is not up within the next 10 years. Do you feel the same way?
I'm curious as to whether it's going to absolve some of this controversy that we had with the BCS. I mean,
I think so.
You think so? Yeah. It should be better than the BCS. Let's hope so, because the BCS, as we all know, was very flawed and caused a lot of turmoil. So, interested to see what happens with this new system.
What I will say is that I think this is a very good system because it still retains the bowls. I mean, that is what I enjoy about college football. I enjoy the end of the year bowls meaning something, and I think it's cool that New Year's Eve is going to have an increased role in football because I don't know how many times where I'm not much of a New Year's Eve partier, and I have very much enjoyed the Chick-fil-A Bowl in the past, but you get a lot of turd games in
We're
that.
going Peach Bowl this year, boys. We're going Peach Bowl.
We're back to the Peach Bowl, and I think this is a very good system where you get your playoff, you get your 4 teams, you also have these classic bowls that are still going to be on the table.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and I think to me what's going to be interesting is over the next 2 or 3 years, kind of what Wyatt alluded to is. I mean, it might help with some of the controversy. I think it also might be worse though too. Instead of one team screaming the loudest for getting left out, there will be years where there will be 2 or 3 teams screaming an octave lower, but the overall decibels will be at a higher level.
Would you say, when we look at those number 5, 6, 7 teams, you wouldn't expect it to go beyond 2 or 3 teams that would have a legitimate argument to be in the Final Four? Would you expect that maybe, there's the argument against, since every one of those teams likely will have at least one loss, where you can say, well, see, you lost to so-and-so by 20 points, that's why you're not in. Can you make the argument against a lot of these teams that may want to get in? Instead of like Auburn in 2004, and they said, well, you went undefeated, like what argument do you have against Auburn that they're not in the title game? Or if you have a 5th or 6th place team, you can say, well, you lost at Illinois, you're out of it, so you don't have much of a argument to be in that Final Four.
In theory, I think that's right, and I agree that it kind of should be that way. But we see every year in college basketball teams that go 20-11 and aren't any good yell and scream about not being the 68th best team in the country and getting in the tournament still. I think the only difference is the more number of there's an inverse ratio of the more teams that get left out, the less they'll have less of a claim, but there will be more teams yelling and screaming. And the fewer teams that get left out, they'll be yelling much, much louder, but there will be fewer teams and they'll have a higher claim, just depending on how many teams get in.
We'll start with the SEC, all in agreement that they are yet again the best conference in the country.
Yep.
Any objections? No objections. When and how did this happen? Because they didn't always used to rule the roost. You could look at, they were 8 years in a row they've made the national title. They won 7 in a row there before last year. When did this happen?
Well, I think it probably started with Florida throttling Ohio State in that national title game in after the 06 season. And most people, I think you could probably say that the 3 best states for recruiting are California, Texas, and Florida. And then I think the next 2 best after that are probably Ohio and Georgia. So the SEC has 2 of them in Florida and Georgia in their footprint already. And then on top of that, and the Pac-12's kind of doing this now, and I think that's why the Pac-12's also really good, but they've just got a whole bunch of fantastic coaches. And when you've got really good head coaches and a lot of really talented players in your recruiting base, it's a lot easier to throw together fantastic teams, as opposed to places like Nebraska or Iowa or Minnesota or Kansas or Colorado having to recruit nationally because there aren't enough players locally to field a top 5 team.
How many teams here in the SEC have a legitimate shot to reach the Final Four? You got Alabama, highly ranked. LSU's all pretty good. They're in the top 15. South Carolina's pretty good. Does it go beyond those 3, or maybe less than that?
I have identified 5: Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Georgia, and South Carolina. I think, like usual, that very early Georgia-South Carolina game in like week 3 will identify who has a great chance of winning that particular division. And I happen to like Georgia quite a bit. So
you said the exact. I listened to last year's show. You said the exact same thing last year.
God damn it!
You're a Georgia guy. You are a Georgia guy.
I am.
Born and bred.
I had a really hard. I'm going to jump around quite a bit, but I had a really hard time just picking one SEC team to be in this playoff, and I know that's what SEC people want to hear. They want 2 teams in this playoff. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is just I think each of those 5 teams will have at least a chance to get themselves involved.
Would you put that number at 5, David?
Yeah, he pretty much said exactly what I was going to say. Those 5 teams, the 5 I had marked up before we started this. I think I'm also on the Georgia bandwagon. Todd Gurley, running back. We've known that the quarterback's been the Heisman Trophy, like 11 of the last 13 years, or whatever the hell it's been. But if there's going to be one, it's going to be him or a guy I mentioned, a true freshman this year at LSU, and Leonard Fournette. He's the closest thing to Adrian Peterson as you're going to get. I would not be surprised if he won one in the near future. But Georgia, under the radar, they hired Florida State's defensive coordinator Jeremy Pruitt in the offseason. That's going to help them tremendously in recruiting and actually playing defense. They're going to be right there, not just this year, but for years to come.
Adrian Peterson 2.0. Is this a right-away impact? No doubt.
Yes.
Big time.
For me, it's an absolute grand slam. He's big time right away. You're going to get a good look at him next week against Wisconsin, one of the marquee games out of the gate. That should be interesting to see where he's at. He's 6'3", 220, can run, absolute bull. Saw him play quite a bit in high school. The comparisons are true. Everyone's all up in arms about him. You're going to love him. He's an absolute monster.
I bet he looks pretty good against Wisconsin. LSU's got 4 or 5 offensive linemen back, and Wisconsin replaces their entire front 7. So I bet he looks pretty good week 1.
Wisconsin's still solid ranked in the top 15, though, preseason. They're going to be pretty good.
I think they will be, but I don't think they'll look good against LSU in week 1 in run defense.
Fair enough.
Alabama's lost 2 in a row. They will not lose 3 in a row to West Virginia. Again, highly ranked. Why can they never have a good quarterback? You got everything else, good running backs, good receivers, a hell of a defense. They got that white guy that just can't, he's not a superstar. He doesn't have to be for them to be good, obviously. But why wouldn't a quarterback say, God damn, I could go there, I could be pretty good?
I know that David's going to jump all over me for this, but I feel like it might be because it's not a huge focus for Nick Saban. Like I feel like his system will just, we can put pretty much any decent quarterback back there and things will work out okay. I mean, he clearly emphasizes defense and having good line play, and then the skill positions, they've had great wide receivers, they've had good running backs, and I guess quarterback has just sort of been secondary. Now, maybe that's not true, maybe that's just been a product of what we've seen, but and you look at it, I'm blanking on the name, wasn't it Coker, the guy who transferred from Florida State?
He's going to be a beast.
Yeah, he's taking a crack at this job. Who knows if he's going to win it? At one point, Saban had said that the other guy, the incumbent, was sort of the favorite, but he's also toyed with the idea of a 2-quarterback system prior to SEC play, and I would have to say that that might be a smart thing to try to get your bearings and then pick a guy. But Coker would be a guy where okay, now he's a game changer at quarterback where he's got a monster arm and he can really sling it. And I mean, Alabama, in a lot of instances, you feel like they're, if they had a better quarterback, they'd be a lock, as the best team, even though they've played to that level in the past.
Jacob Coker was at Florida State, like Marcus said. Only reason he transferred, because obviously James is their Heisman-winning quarterback in his first year. Coker's got one of the biggest arms a lot of people have ever seen. It's just a matter of putting them together and being able to pick up Alabama's offense quick enough. He transferred in this summer. If he's the guy that a lot of people think he might be, Alabama's almost a lock for that playoff. There's so much potential with this guy. Like I said, there was a reason he was at Florida State until James came along. He was going to be the guy. And, I mean, arguably, without even playing last year, a lot of people say he is probably the fourth or fifth most talented quarterback in the country.
What I will say, too, to your point about Alabama not having a quarterback, look at LSU and how many years they've kind of just, limped along with whatever they can sort of put together. They've had a lot of quarterbacks, Jamarcus Russell and Jordan Jefferson, and even Zach Mettenberger had a pretty bad stretch there for a while before he put a couple 300-yard games together. Auburn has played has had 7 different quarterbacks in the last 7 years, lead them in passing. So I don't know what it is about the SEC and the SEC West in this case, where they just kind of, whoever they can roll out there, or maybe the quarterback position is really just that competitive. And I know that there's obviously competitions at 2 of those 3 schools for quarterback, but it is kind of interesting that's not a settled position all the time.
I think part of it's just stylistically of what they do in the SEC, and it was a little bit different last year because they had so many good quarterbacks. And as a quick side note, their offense isn't going to look nearly as good this year as a whole in the conference because they lost so many good quarterbacks. But I think style-wise, they just really like, the old school, we're going to play great defense and we're going to punt and we don't care. We're going to win this game 8-6 and we're going to win the field position battle for the next 17 minutes game time because we're ahead by 1 right now and we're going to force you to drive the whole field and beat us.
But here's the thing with like LSU, every year you hear, they're going to have an explosive offense, Les Miles, they're really going to have something great. And then, it's 10-6 victories, quite a bit. And I obviously David mentioned the running back that could potentially blow things up this year. But it seems like LSU promises big offensive production every year, and they never deliver.
Yeah, LSU, it seems like always they've got 7 blue-chip running backs and 15 blue-chip offensive linemen, and then Les Miles just says, you know what, I take enough gambles. We're not going to take any gambles with their quarterback. We're just going to keep doing this toss to the right and toss to the left, and we're just going to throw our running backs at the defense like cannon fodder and wear them down and win.
Auburn's running game last year was as good as I've ever seen. At the end of it, that was as fun to watch. Seeing you know what they were going to do. One of 3 guys was going to get the ball, and they ran the hell over teams. That was fun to watch. So that was not, the quarterback didn't, he was part of it, not through his arm, but that was, as far as offense in the SEC goes, that's as good of an offense putting up points and yards as we've seen in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think that, especially in the SEC, it seems like the quarterback isn't as much of a factor as it is in other conferences. I mean, you look at the Big 12, the Pac-12, even the Big 10, the quarterback has always kind of been a prominent position, and then you get to the SEC and you've got so much talent spread around that, it's like, screw the quarterback. We've got 10 other guys that can get the job done for us, and, I mean, he's just kind of a side shadow to the rest of the, guys on the team. So,
He's
at least in my mind,
he's the salt and pepper to the meal. Do you need the salt and pepper? Maybe not.
just pepper, just pepper.
The salt's bad for you.
Go to hell, salt. Go to hell.
The pepper really can't hurt you.
Good. Make you sneeze though. So that sucks.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin, offensive coordinator, Alabama. Is that going to change anything?
It's going to be awfully interesting at the very least. I've always said, I've never been a massive Lane Kiffin guy. I've always said, though, that he is a pretty elite offensive mind. he's better suited in this role than he was to be head coach at USC. With the talent he's inheriting, the way he can recruit, it's going to be, assuming it doesn't go south this year, it's going to be pretty interesting and fun to see how it develops in the next 2 or 3 years. That could be Saban's last little toy that he needs to absolutely run over college football again like he has been the last 5 years.
It'll be interesting to see with Lane Kiffin, how much reign he gets and how much Saban lets him do. I think, to an extent, I agree with Schottenkirk. I think he's a really good recruiter. I think he's a good offensive coordinator, but I think it's also worth noting that the talent they had at USC, both as a coordinator and as a head coach now, that I think a lot of people who are very mediocre would have probably looked pretty good. And we're not going to know any different this year because it's not like they're lacking talent at Alabama either. But that gets into what's more important, players or coaching, and that's a completely different side debate.
Marcus, David.
I was just going to say that his recruiting ability, like you said, probably does mask a lot of the flaws that he might have, but he has talent to cover them up. So I agree with what you were saying, Charlie.
Yeah, I think he's really rough around the edges. He seems like he's got a good mind and he can make things happen, but it's just a matter of harnessing that inner talent that he has. I personally don't really care for him much, but I think if you give him time, he'd make things happen.
Marcus mentioned 5 teams. I mentioned 3. I don't think Georgia will be in that conversation, even though they could win their division. And I don't think Auburn is in that conversation either, just because of their schedule. The first tough game is at Kansas State on a Thursday night. And apparently, because this is a Thursday night, everybody is shitting their pants because Thursday nights apparently they play these games on the goddamn moon on Thursday nights. So they all go nuts for that, and everybody will be pumping their veins full of cocaine. So that's a tough one. They host LSU on October 4th. They host South Carolina on October 25th. They're at Ole Miss. We'll see what they can do. They're at Georgia. They end the year at Alabama. So if they can run the table or even have one loss, they have currently 6-7 teams on their schedule that are ranked right now, and they have a hell of a schedule. Can Auburn navigate this somehow to where they can get to 12-1?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be, like you said, I think the schedule's too nasty. And I think overall, they'll be better this year than they were last year, but they won't have those 5 miracle finishes they all won. They'll essentially end up losing. Yeah, they should have lost to Georgia. They should have lost to Alabama. They probably should have lost to Texas A&M and Mississippi State, too.
The Alabama game, at least it was tied at the end where they were going to go into overtime. That Georgia game, I mean, everybody's going to remember the Alabama game more, but I think that Georgia game was more of an unlikely comeback. They were down by 1, 4th and 18, 70 yards away. The Georgia game was more impressive, I thought.
They were more in danger of losing Georgia than they were to Alabama, like you said, because the other one was tied. But, yeah, I mean, I think they had like 6 really close games last year. I think they might only have 3 or 4, but they just won't win all of those this year. And they'll have, I think they'll be plenty good, but they'll probably have 2 losses at the end of the year.
Auburn is unique in the fact that I think they're one of the few schools of the Power 5 that can go like 3-8 one year and then turn around and go like 12-1 the next. That's not typical in the college football landscape these days. Usually it takes teams 5 years to get to 12 wins once they start rebuilding, and it's just amazing how Auburn can just surprise everybody and totally pull a miraculous season out of a prior horrible season.
Gene Chizik, worst coach to win a national championship since God knows when. Since old Alamus Alonzo Stagg.
He did have Malzahn as his offensive coordinator, though.
Speaking of that, he's pretty good.
He is pretty good. And one thing that's worth noting, I remember people were talking about this like shortly after the season ended. I don't know if I've heard it as much now. But this is like the first time ever Malzahn's had a returning starter at quarterback because either guys have been seniors or he's left to take another job. So in theory, Nick Marshall could all of a sudden be much better than he was last year, and he was pretty good last year. Either way, I think it'll probably help him to have some continuity at quarterback.
The discrepancy between the West and the East when they schedule games here. LSU, they're at Florida and versus Kentucky. One decent game. One game they're going to beat the hell out of Kentucky. Nathan Sacken, we welcome you.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
Very good audio. Very good audio.
Thank you.
Video quality solid as well. Auburn, as we mentioned, South Carolina at Georgia. That's the toughest road to hoe. And Alabama, they always get the easy road at Tennessee, and they also have to play at Florida. Alabama versus Florida, their next meeting is scheduled for 2021. So see it now or don't see it for the next 7 years.
Ridiculous.
It's dumb. Do you see the SEC going to 9 games in the conference anytime soon here?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
I think it gets done 2 or 3, maybe 4 years. They've been talking about it. Saban's been pushing for it. There's been a couple of coaches in the conference that seem like they wouldn't mind it. Why not? Already proclaimed to be the best conference. Why not have one more game and prove it even further?
Yeah, I would agree. I think they're going to. Because with 14 teams, you need to play 9 conference games because otherwise you're only playing 2 from the other division. And like Travis said, you just go too long without playing other teams. And I know the Big Ten, they're going to 9 games, I think, next year. And I think you'll see the SEC within the next 2 or 3 years move to 9.
Nathan Stacken.
Yes.
How many teams in the SEC here do you see? How many have a chance at that Final Four?
I have 4. I have Georgia, LSU, Alabama, and South Carolina. I like what the old ball coach there does. Georgia got a great running back in Todd Gurley, who I think is a viable candidate for the Heisman. Yes, they lose Aaron Murray, but I do look at them and think they have a chance. And actually, the game I think it really comes down to is going to be LSU, Alabama, though LSU got a tough meeting with Wisconsin to begin the season. But I think that LSU-Alabama clash, I guess you could throw Auburn in too, so maybe I'll throw 5. But LSU, Alabama, and Alabama-Auburn, I think, are the 2 biggest games that are going to decide who can make it to the playoffs out of the SEC.
I do like the LSU-Auburn, Alabama round-robin tournament here. All games are about a month apart, so they're evenly spaced apart. LSU at Auburn October 6th, Alabama at LSU on November 8th, and then Auburn at Alabama November 29th, so that'll be fun to watch. I also have LSU and South Carolina later in the year, and of course, as Marcus mentioned, Georgia at South Carolina early in the season here in about 3 weeks. Get to the title picks. Who do you like coming out of each division, and who makes the playoff from the SEC? Charlie Hildebrand.
I'll do less on the West. I've got Alabama out of the West. They've got 3 offensive linemen back. I think for most of these, I wrote down how many offensive linemen they've got back as a Joe Blow, not even the biggest division, former South Dakota offensive lineman. I like good offensive line play. And Alabama might have 3 of the 5 best running backs in the country. I think that basically they can just say, let's line up in the wishbone and throw these 3 guys LSU cannon fodder style and could beat just about anybody. So I've got Alabama out of the West. Out of the East, I've got South Carolina. They play Georgia at home. 4 of 5 offensive linemen back. Mike Davis, one of the best really good running backs nobody talks about. New quarterback in Dylan Thompson, but he's got a lot of experience. He's thrown for 2,000 career passing yards and has played in big games because Connor Shaw was hurt a lot. And we all know that they got the old ball coach, and Spurrier's a shifty one.
He's a shifty one.
And I got South Carolina beating Alabama. At some point, I think Spurrier's gonna win the SEC, and I think they're gonna find a way to get it done.
I alluded to White off there that I had a new Clemson. South Carolina will be my new Clemson.
What I'll say, though, is that's disrespectful to Clemson to pick their rival as your new Clemson.
Let's get it done, boy. Let's get it done. Prove me wrong, Clemson. You want to prove South Carolina wrong? beat their asses. How about it?
That's true. I don't remember what the quote was from Spurrier, but about it being like a one-team state because Clemson can't ever beat South Carolina.
The quote from Spurrier was "suck it," I believe.
That was not the quote, but that was the gist. Yes.
With his shirt off.
Yeah, I like that.
So I mean, for me personally, South Carolina is a team that I like to. They're in the top 10 right now, but they always fall short. And Stones by Hildebrand, they're picking them to win. So they obviously make the. I guess we'll get to the playoff later, but they obviously make it. And
spoiler alert: I don't have them getting left out.
There you go. That three-loss South Carolina team not making the title game there. And Alabama, that leaves some intrigue later on in the program. Will Charlie have Alabama making the playoff, losing the SEC title game? Tune in 3 hours from now, and we'll get to that. Marcus Traxler, SEC. Who's Alabama beating?
Who's Alabama beating? I don't have Alabama making the SEC championship game, and I know that's
holy shit, kid.
That's kind of some blasphemy.
But they're making the playoff, though, right?
Well, I don't have them in the playoff either. I'm taking LSU to win the SEC.
Wrong.
All right, fine. I don't have a problem being wrong. I'm going to make these picks, and if I'm wrong, that's fine. But I think like
Georgia?
You said, I do like Georgia. Yes. LSU, they have Auburn on the road October 4th. I think they can win at Auburn, and then they have Alabama about a month later at home. That's the right combination. You want Alabama at home, and you can beat Auburn on the road. So I will take LSU to get to that SEC championship game. I do like Georgia, and I like Georgia to make the playoff. I know that this is basically a repeat of last year, but I think that they can go to Columbia and beat South Carolina. They have a very manageable crossover schedule, as you mentioned. I mean, they don't play Alabama. They don't play LSU. So I will take Georgia. I like Todd Gurley a lot. I think they'll have a manageable offense at quarterback, and they have good weapons on the outside. And their defense brings back 8 starters. I think that's a good combination for Georgia. Fool me once, and I'll do it again this year, picking Georgia. So I have Georgia beating LSU in the SEC championship game.
Fool me twice, you can't be fooled again.
Right? Yep.
I believe the stat is the last 5 or 6 years, Alabama's been picked to win the SEC in a few of those years, and they have not won the SEC in those years, and they are picked to win it this year. So that is a streak that they look to break. Nathan Stack, an SEC title game.
I think out of the East, as everyone has been mentioning, it's going to come down, I think, to the South Carolina-Georgia game, September 13th. I will take Georgia at this point to win that game and win the East. The West is far more cloudy. I could see Alabama, LSU, or Auburn all making it out of the West, but I'm going to take a ride with the Bayou Bengals and Les Miles. He'll eat some grass, and I'll try them to win it all. I think you're going to see Leonard Fournette, the freshman running back that they got. He's going to have a very solid year and will help the transition. I'm a little worried about their quarterbacks without the guy last year. He's in Tennessee right now. Yeah, thank you. I was going to say Brent Musburger, but he's not playing for them at all. But I think Cam Cameron will be able to get some good play out of the quarterbacks, but I think Leonard Fournette's going to be a major reason why LSU can beat Alabama when they come into Death Valley, and I have LSU Georgia in the SEC championship game.
LSU winning?
Yeah. Why not? I'll take LSU.
Over under week 7, but before Fournette tears his ACL.
I hope it's way over.
I got the under. David Schottenkirk, Alabama and who?
Alabama and Georgia. No surprise. I'm kind of surprised no one that has Bama in the title game thus far, but
Charlie got it.
Okay.
They're not winning it though.
Right. But I'll take Bama to win it. Unfortunately, I'll save it for later, but Georgia might be in my playoff as well.
There we go. So we have 4 predictions here. Marcus and Nathan have the same. Mr. Rogenkamp, SEC, what do you like?
I think this is South Carolina's year to get over that.
There you go.
Because they're always sitting up there lately. They just can't do it. I think this year they're going to make some noise and get over that obstacle course. And I think they're going to meet Alabama in the title game. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I think they're going to beat Bama. So I'm picking South Carolina.
So we got Charlie and Wyatt. They have the same with South Carolina pulling the upset here over Alabama. I will take LSU versus South Carolina. Something that has not been picked yet, and I like LSU to win that game and head on to the Final Four playoff. So after 10 hours on the SEC, we'll move to the Big Ten. Are they the second best conference, or
No.
any West Coast fans out there? Anybody like the Pac-12?
Pac-12 is head and shoulders above the Big Ten.
Is that right? Who's better, Purdue? Purdue or
How do you
Cal?
define head and shoulders?
Purdue or who?
Purdue or
Whichever
Cal?
team has less dandruff, Charlie.
So, Purdue or California?
But between Purdue and Cal, they're both awful. I
Purdue's probably
don't
better.
think anybody cares who wins.
No,
We'd rather see
Purdue
Michigan State
sucks.
and Oregon in week 2.
Purdue's probably better than Cal. Cal's got a pretty good quarterback. The rest of the roster's complete dog shit.
Big Ten, the big injury to Braxton Miller, Ohio State. Does that change your plans for them?
Yes.
Consensus number 1, a little bit harder road, or do they not win at all?
I don't have them in the Big Ten championship game. I think that their defense is still very stout, but I think there's just a few too many questions with what they're going to be doing here at quarterback, and so that will have me picking Michigan State in that division.
You said they were very stout. The defense.
Yes.
Is it Amanda Stout?
That's not where I was going, but yeah, I mean, you can make your own inferences.
Michigan State, their defense is really good. Their offense, to coin the term from Trottenkirk, horseshit. Dog shit. Not good. Are you buying in? They're not a traditional power. They won the deal last year. Is this going to be a run? Can they continue this?
It's worth noting their offense was pretty good the last 2 or 3 games of the year last year against the best teams they played. So they were fairly good at the right time.
Their running game is very good.
Is Connor Cook coming back too or not?
He's coming back, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, he's back. Cook made some big. He threw for 300 yards each game the last 2 years. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. He's not even on my dark horse list for the Heisman, but he's good enough that he could beat a lot of the Big Ten teams out there.
That is the reason I have some confidence in Michigan State. They have Connor Cook, and they have Jeremy Langford, who's not a bad running back, actually pretty decent in the Big Ten. So, and their defense also usually good. So that's why I have some faith in Michigan State. They have that game against Oregon in week 2, and even if they lose that game, I think the Big Ten's going to have a hard time getting a team into the playoff, in my opinion. So this could be, if they could rattle off a bunch of wins, and they have the key game against Ohio State on the 8th at home, November 8th at home. I feel like the winner of that game not only wins the division, but has sort of that catbird seat to potentially get in a playoff berth.
I think you're going to see a lot of believers in Michigan State if they go up to Eugene and beat Oregon in week 2. I think that's the only way they can get to the playoffs because, just looking at some of the schedules like Wisconsin and Iowa, it's just really, really easy for them to go undefeated, but it doesn't mean they're one of the best teams in college football. So I think Michigan State will win the East, and I'll just say it right now, I think Wisconsin wins the West.
Are you stealing the ESPN Big Ten storylines? Are we really going to sit here and say that a 12-1 Big Ten team's that wins the conference isn't going to get into the 14 playoff?
Just saying, look at the schedule. Like Lee Corso says.
Real
Look at
quick,
this.
we're going to settle this right now. If you're undefeated, you're getting in. If you get one loss but you win your conference, you're getting in unless everyone else has one loss or is also undefeated. So it doesn't matter. Indiana or even Wake Forest, if you go 12-1 and you win your conference, you're going to get in over a 10-2 Big 12 team or a 10-2 SEC team that won their conference.
I'm sitting here and saying that it's very possible that the Big Ten champion is not going to make the playoff, even at 12-1.
Really?
Yeah.
I agree with Charlie here. You got one loss, you're in a big-time conference, you're getting it. As long as that loss isn't, a terrible loss.
Okay, so what if you have two teams in the Pac-12 that have one loss and two teams in the SEC that have one loss? Are you going to take, let's say that's Oregon, Stanford, or Stanford, UCLA, and Alabama and Georgia, whoever? I would put those four teams in over an undefeated Wisconsin.
No, well,
you might. It won't happen.
If it's undefeated
you
Wisconsin,
go undefeated, there's no way you're not getting in if you're one of the Power 5 teams.
If it's undefeated Wisconsin, they got to run the table. They're going to have, LSU. That's going to be a good win. They're going to win the Big Ten. Stanford, Oregon, one of them's going to lose, and the winner's likely going to be the Pac-10 champ, Pac-12 champ. So if you lose that game, Stanford, Oregon, and you don't win the conference, you're done. So that leaves one of them out. And there's going to be, unless there's two undefeated teams heading into the SEC title game, or a team with one loss beats an undefeated team, I think the SEC probably gets one. But the Big Ten, not as good as they've been in the past. We got Michigan State, Wisconsin. I really like Wisconsin. And Ohio State, they still should be pretty good. I'd say no more than 3 losses. So I think if Michigan State or Wisconsin wins the Big Ten, they get in. Division realignment, they figured it out, for Christ's sake. It took them too many years to do that. East and West. A lot of teams, it's right down the middle. If you're in the East, figure it out, you're in the Eastern Division. If you're in the West, you're in the Western Division. How does that affect things now? Because I think Wisconsin's the big winner now. I think they've got a good chance to win that division for quite a few years.
I know that a lot of people really like Iowa this year. I think that it also helps a team like Nebraska. God forbid if Minnesota ever got their shit together, it would certainly help them. These are. It does open things up for these other teams. I see that East being a very difficult division. Simply because I don't think Penn State's going to be held down for very long. Ohio State's going to be good. Michigan State's going to be good. And so I think if you have both sides kind of pulling their weight, it could turn out to be something really good. But right now, Wisconsin is the best team in the West, and I tried putting Iowa right there with them. I don't see. I could see those teams being very close in record. Maybe each of them having one loss when they meet November 22nd in Iowa City. But I think Wisconsin will win that division.
Iowa has a dog shit of a schedule. As always, I pull for Northern Iowa. I think they're year in and year out the best team in Iowa, college football-wise. They got Ball State. They got Iowa State. At Pittsburgh, at Purdue. They are not facing a ranked team until Wisconsin at the end of the year and Nebraska, and then host both of those games. I don't think Iowa's going to be any good, but they got to win at least 10 of these games, don't they? They don't play anybody.
Historically, it seems like whenever anybody thinks Iowa's going to be really good, they usually fall on their face. And when they think Iowa's going to be awful, that's when they win 11 games. So based off that, I would mean they're probably going to go 7-5 this year.
Good.
Well, there's a good chance that they'll be undefeated when they come to Minneapolis in November, 8-0. How about maybe they get beat. Maybe they get beat by those Gophers.
Yeah, no.
Even though I did kind of, I will say that, and not that you guys want to hear about the Gophers, but
break it down right now. Your official preview right here.
Are you gonna give me a minute?
Give us the 2 deep. Give us the 2 deep.
If you talk about Glenn Mason's Gophers of old, yes, but not this horse shit nowadays.
Oh, jeez.
I'm seeing 7-5 here. I'm seeing 7-5.
I am too. I think.
No, what
Trip
was
to
I?
the
I'm
Texas
sorry.
Bowl.
I'm sorry. I meant 5-7.
That makes sense that you wouldn't be able to read that. I think that they'll go to TCU. I told David earlier this fall that that's going to be like a 23-6.
It's fall.
Loss. Yeah, earlier. It's not fall yet, I guess. Okay, sorry. So 3-1. One of these years they're going to win when they play Michigan. Here's a big spoiler. I think Michigan has a pretty terrible season by their own standards, and I think Brady Hoke gets fired. And I think Minnesota will beat them, and that will be part of the reason Brady Hoke gets fired. So you're looking at, at worst, you can't be any worse than 5-2 when you go play Illinois in the middle of the season. You have to win that game, and you're 6-2, and then you're staring at,
6-2.
Well,
Nice.
you're 6-2 if you lose to Michigan.
Well,
I'm hoping that doesn't happen. So 6-2, 7-1. Now you're playing Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, Wisconsin. You can win one of those games and you get to 8-4. But I think they're going to be hard pressed. I would say that of those games, Iowa is the one game that they have a chance of winning. It's at home. So I think 8-4 would be an ideal situation. This is a very difficult schedule for Minnesota, but I would say that 7-5 is the best I can realistically see them doing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Seems reasonable, and I agree that Hoke gets fired.
I just look at that. I think they have a few losses on their schedule that are just kind of guarantees, and then they'll give up a few more. And I think Michigan's kind of at a pressing point where this is kind of a make or break year for Hoke. They need to make some headway in that division, and I don't think it happens. I think even at 7-5, he can get fired.
Yeah, they've gotten worse each year under Hoke, and they keep saying he recruits great and is bringing in better and better classes, but their athletes on the field seem to look worse and worse each year.
I can't believe they keep putting Devin Gardner out there at quarterback, and Michigan should be able to do better than that. It's kind of embarrassing.
And what's his name? Green, their running back, who's supposed to be the best thing coming in a decade. That's what it said on the internet. But he's looked really awful and fat and slow.
Over under 1,000 yards for Minnesota's leading passer.
Over. Pretty.
Over?
Yes, more than 1,000 yards passing. Yes.
Who was their leading passer last year?
Well, they had two quarterbacks last year. One of them.
How many yards did he have?
Philip Nelson threw for 1288.
Who was number 2?
No,
Leidner?
He had 14.
He had 14. I don't think this is going to be an issue.
I had a bowel movement today that was longer than that. Gracious. Charlie Hildebrand, Nebraska.
I think Nebraska will be interesting. Nebraska didn't have a 1,000-yard passer last year because they had 3 different quarterbacks that played. And when you don't have a guy starting 10 games, it's tougher to get to that real tough 1,000-yard passing mark.
They had the heir to the Kellogg fortune lead them. So.
You guys all accept that as being a reasonable response for Nebraska, but Minnesota, hey, go to hell. Go to hell.
It's because you're wearing that
They'll
stupid
never throw the
hat.
ball at Nebraska, though.
If Philip Nelson was running for 1,000 yards a year, that'd be fine. And he wasn't killing guys off the field.
Nebraska in the 30s was more scared of the forward pass than Nazi Germany. But on a quick Nebraska breakdown, in the West, I think Nebraska might have the most talent. I think they easily have the most difficult schedule of the 3 contenders in Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa. They've got to play both Wisconsin and Iowa. From what I remember, now with these 14-team conferences, it's a big deal who you play from the other division. Wisconsin plays Maryland and Rutgers. Iowa, I believe, plays Maryland and Indiana, and Nebraska plays Rutgers, but they also have to play at Michigan State. So I think Nebraska could be, 10-2, 9-3. Somehow we know they're going to get 4 losses. I don't know where they come, but I don't think that Nebraska wins the West. I think they play. You could make a pretty good case that their 4 toughest conference games are on the road.
Well, I mean, I would say that Nebraska. I mean, they're one of the teams that will benefit from this newfangled Western Division. If they have their act together, they should be in a position where they could compete for the division title.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing I should say I also like is, Armstrong back. I think he'll be okay. I don't think he'll be great. I think, with Amir Abdullah back at running back, I think they're gonna, and they've got a couple other backups that are good. I think they will try to do the same thing as LSU and Alabama and cannon fodder defenses with running backs. And then one thing I like that Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Iowa all don't play until November, so it'll be late in the year, and this could blow up and they all have 4 losses when they played, but they could all theoretically be, 8-1, 7-2, 9-1 when they play, and I think that makes things more interesting.
I think that's going to help the division look a lot better than it really is, because you're going to have it be relatively competitive until the end when those teams finally play each other.
I want Wyatt to explain to me how excited he is for Rutgers and Maryland in the Big Ten.
Well, I didn't have a bowel movement yet, but it might happen.
Good.
But no, I don't even want to talk about those 2 schools. I don't know why the hell they're in the conference. It's just atrocious in my mind. It shouldn't even have happened. But anyway, I'm going to move on and give you a little rundown of my synopsis. I think despite Ohio State losing Braxton Miller, they're still gonna win the East. Judging from a few articles I read, and maybe this is just baloney, but they said that Ohio State's playing just as good or better without Braxton right now, and I believe that they're gonna win the East and they're gonna win the conference. I don't think Nebraska's gonna eclipse Wisconsin in the West. It's funny because Nebraska doesn't seem like they have a home field advantage, and it doesn't seem like they I don't know. They're a hard team to figure out because they can go on the road and lose to Minnesota, and then they can beat like Michigan State at home or something. But I think Michigan State has eclipsed Michigan as the team in Michigan, and that's a big deal. That's almost a bigger deal than Michigan State, Ohio State. I think Michigan State is going to give Ohio State a hell of a battle, but I think Ohio State and Wisconsin are going to be your 2 respective division leaders.
You like Ohio State winning the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So off Wisconsin. Mr. Schottenkirk, your Big Ten title pick.
Pretty chalk. I'm going to go Michigan State over Wisconsin. I thought about Michigan State over Iowa, but I don't have the balls to do it. Wisconsin's going to be better than a lot of people think, even though they're already pretty highly ranked. I think that first game against LSU is going to be pretty close. Running back, Melvin Gordon, one of the best running backs they've had. They've had a stable recently. In my opinion, he's the best one. They got Tanner McAvoy starting at quarterback now over Joel Stabby, whatever his name is. That was kind of a surprise. That was just announced a few days ago. Defense, they lost a lot. They think they'll be fine, though. Schedule's okay. Big, tough game at Iowa. That'll determine the West, in my opinion. I think they win it. I think Michigan State wins the conference title.
Nathan Stacken.
I got Michigan State against Wisconsin, and I pray to God that Wisconsin loses because I hate those bastards. So I'll take Michigan State to beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game.
Marcus Draxler.
Minnesota over Michigan State. I'm kidding.
I was just saying, I hope someone has some stones with the Big Ten, because I don't.
I don't. I mean, I think Wisconsin does. Here's what I think will happen, and I think this will fit my my storyline that the winner of this conference will finish pretty well. I think Wisconsin loses one of those games to either Iowa or Nebraska at the end of the year. They still win the division, and they go when they play Michigan State, they beat them. I think when it comes down putting them against everybody else, some of these other conference winners, I don't think the Big Ten's going to have what it needs to get a representative. So I think Wisconsin beats Michigan State, and I don't think the winner makes it to the playoff.
So Wisconsin with 2 losses probably?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I think even a 1-loss Wisconsin, I don't want to spoil the playoff thing yet because I know we're going to get to that at the end, but I think that there's going to be at least 2 undefeated teams in that playoff, and so then you're going to, there's just not going to be a lot. You're going to have a representative from the SEC and one other team. I think that the Pac-12, we're going to get to them. I think they're going to have a very good conference, and whoever they send will be the last representative.
Charlie Hildebrand.
I already talked about it some. I got Wisconsin from the West. I think they've got a much, much easier schedule than Nebraska. And I think, they've got brand new receivers, brand new front 7, but they might have the best running game in the conference. 4 starters back on their O-line. Melvin Gordon, who's fantastic. They're going to rush for a boatload of yards like they always do. And I haven't heard anyone say this, and from my quick research, Ohio State has a chance to finish the regular season undefeated for a 3rd year in a row. And I believe nobody's done that since Nebraska in the mid-'90s. Irrelevant. I think Michigan State beats them. I think Michigan State gets Nebraska, Ohio State, and Michigan at home. Lose a few guys on defense, but Narduzzi always has a really good defense. He's a good defensive coordinator. And I've got Michigan State beating Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game.
We have 3 Michigan States, an Ohio State, and Wisconsin.
Does anybody think Penn State will make any noise? They could be a sleeper in there somewhere, I'm thinking.
I don't know. Are they eligible, or are they still not eligible?
They're still not eligible this year.
But, I mean, in the regular season, they might make a little uproar there.
I think they'll be the 3rd best team in that division, and maybe with I think they easily pass Michigan. That's another reason why I think Michigan drops. And I think that if the injury, if the quarterback thing continues to be a problem for Ohio State, then potentially, Penn State's the 2nd best team in that division.
I know Christian Hackenberg's only a sophomore, but he's obviously super talented, and this isn't a perfect example because one of them, comparing him to Eli. I kind of compare him to Eli Manning at Ole Miss, though, his senior year, where I think because of their quarterback, they'll be able to beat almost anybody on their schedule at Penn State. I don't think they will. I think they'll still lose 4 or 5 games because of depth problems, because of the sanctions, and they've got to replace a whole bunch of starters on the O-line and on defense. But with Hackenberg, I think it's possible that other than Michigan State and maybe Ohio State, I could see him beating anybody else that they play.
I like LSU and Wisconsin. I like that game here in the first weekend. I think LSU is going to win. But if Wisconsin wins that game, it almost gives them like a get-out-of-jail-free card, since I think that's going to be a really, really good win at the end of the year, where they could still lose the game in the Big Ten and still win the conference and make the playoff. I like Wisconsin to win the Big Ten and make the playoff over Michigan State. I think people are sleeping on Wisconsin. As Charlie mentioned, their schedule easier than Nebraska's, and they got a big-time game versus LSU. And if you win that, you're sitting pretty the first week of the season. The Pac-12's up next. People here think this is the 2nd best conference in the nation. I think it's overrated with UCLA, and we'll see what Washington does. Stanford and Oregon are really good, but does this, for you to say this is the 2nd best conference? Everybody likes Oregon. Everybody likes Stanford. Is everybody banking on UCLA being a top 10 team? Because I don't think they are.
Wow.
Well, you don't think
I think
they
could be.
No, at the end of the year, I don't think they'll be a top 10 team.
No.
Have you looked at their schedule?
Yeah, all of their tough all the tough games are at home.
They have
Yeah.
every game at home they have.
They're losing to Oregon. I think they're losing to USC.
USC is not beating them this year. I hate to say it. There's no way. I'm going to go ahead and spoiler alert here. Brett Hundley's my Heisman. So you can see that UCLA is pretty high in my regard this year. All the tough games, they have Oregon, USC, and Stanford at home. They play Texas in Arlington like week 3. They have one tough road game all year, maybe 2. Hundley is an absolute animal. Offensive weapons, Miles Jack on defense, Jim Mora. For me, it's a playoff team. We'll get into more depth here, but I have UCLA in my 14 playoff.
Very good.
David took all the words right out of my mouth. Brett Hundley is my Heisman pick. I think UCLA, another team that will benefit under its third year under its coach. I think it's a UCLA Oregon. They'll be the 2 teams in the conference championship at the end of the year. I think the winner goes to the playoff. I think UCLA wins that game. And they have all those games at home. And as opposed to to the point about it being a better conference, you look at the 3 teams in the North. I think Washington will be good this year. They have a lot of winnable games on their schedule. And then you still have Oregon, you still have Stanford. You look in the South, I think Arizona will be a better team. I don't know how many wins that equates to. I have USC as a 9-win team, and I think that UCLA is going to have a great season.
I think UCLA could be really good. I've seen Brett Hundley torch Nebraska's defense the last 2 years. He's obviously, and they got plenty of cats that can play. I think, and the problem, and I think you could say this about a lot of Pac-12 teams, I could see 6 or 7 of the teams being really good, but all of them play brutal schedules. The thing is, in a 12-team conference, when you're playing 9 conference games, instead of playing, an extra game against San Jose State or, some Mountain West or former WAC team, you're playing, unless you're playing Cal or Colorado, you're playing someone pretty good in conference. And I think it just kind of depends which team can navigate these brutal schedules. And I think the other interesting thing to me about the Pac-12 is I think this is the best conference collection of quarterbacks since the Big 12 in the mid-2000s. I know the Big 12 had that year where they had, I think they had Sam Bradford and Colt McCoy and Graham Harrell at Texas Tech, and they had 6 guys finish with a passer rating above 150 or something like that. And I think the Pac-12 will be like that this year too. They'll have a whole bunch of fantastic quarterbacks making plays, and it will be very entertaining to watch the conference race.
The polar opposite of the SEC right there.
There you go. I look at UCLA's schedule, as David mentioned. I think they lose to Oregon. I think they lose to Stanford, even though they host them. USC, for USC to go, I have USC winning the South. So for them to go where I need them to go, they got to beat UCLA here. And that Texas game, I think I'm interested to see what they do. Essentially, it's been a road game there, and they're at Arizona State. So I see 5 potential losses there, and I think they lose probably at least 2 or 3 of them. So I think even though they got Oregon and Stanford at home, I think they lose at least one of those. And they're at Arizona State. And nobody's mentioned Arizona State yet, but they were pretty good last year, and they should be pretty good again this year. In the North, Stanford, they've beaten Oregon the last 2 years. Oregon, they got to the title game last year. Stanford, Oregon, can Stanford make it 3 in a row? And does that matter as far as the who represents the North? Because it did not last year.
Quick stat note on Stanford trying to go 3 in a row. Since conference title game started with the SEC in, I think, 92, there have only been 3 teams that have won the conference championship to win the conference 3 years in a row. Florida did it in the mid-90s with Spurrier. Marshall did it in the late 90s with Byron Leftwich and Chad Pennington. And Oklahoma did it in the mid-2000s with Sam Bradford. So
that's solid.
They could do it. I'm not saying Stanford can or can't. I'm not giving my picks away yet. But historically, if it's a conference with a conference title game, it's really damn tough to win that 3 years in a row.
Oregon's not losing a 3rd year in a row to them. I think Stanford's going to take pretty decent-sized step back. They're still obviously pretty good. They lost a shit ton off their defense. Offensively, haven't been sold. Offensive linemen, they lost a couple of their guards in the draft. I think Oregon was basically 1 or 2 plays away last year from being in the title game. Mariota got hurt in that Stanford game. He made it a decent game there at the end. Look at their schedule for Oregon. Michigan State week 2. That's obviously a massive game. At UCLA, I think they lose in the regular season at UCLA, but I think it's Oregon, UCLA in the title game. I think Oregon gets them. So that's where the interest comes in. Again, spoiler alert, I might have 2 Pac-12 teams in the 14 playoff.
So does that mean you have UCLA going undefeated in the regular season?
I do.
Look at this. Anybody like Marcus Mariota for Heisman? We got a couple of Brett Hundley fans.
Well,
He's on my list.
What I'll say is that I think, it comes down to that championship game. I think Marcus Mariota and Brett Hundley are playing for the Heisman in that game, and I think that would be quite a bit of fun. I think Marcus Mariota's kind of this is his 3rd year as quarterback, right?
Yes.
And so now, the last 2 years people have kind of been waiting for him to really truly explode, and I think this year he does. I think those 2 quarterbacks are representative of this conference as a whole, and I think we just have a lot on the line when the Pac-12 holds its championship game at the new stadium in Santa Clara.
Yeah, I really like Marcus Mariota's schedule this year. His class schedule. He's only taking yoga and golf, so it's not going to be too rigorous for him. He'll be able to get stretched. He'll avoid the injuries thanks to all that yoga. The big game for them is the second week against Michigan State, but I think Oregon is going to beat Stanford this year, though there's a culture being built at Stanford that's very difficult to overcome. It seems like it doesn't matter who they lose. They just keep plugging guys in. You buy into the system, and they win. But having said that, I'm going to take Oregon against UCLA in the championship game.
Goddamn pen. My goddamn pen stack, and you broke it. Son of
Get
a
a
bitch.
different pen then, you
Son
jerk.
of a bitch. All righty, we're going. Oregon. UCLA. You like Oregon?
I like UCLA. I like UCLA.
Oregon.
Yep, I like UCLA to be the winners, but you know what?
No, I'm less convinced about my UCLA pick. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Oh, jeez, you turned them. You turned them.
Actually, I was going more off you, Schottenkirk. That's why I kind of went UCLA there. But I do agree. I think it's UCLA and Oregon battling it out. But I am interested to see what Chris Peterson does up there in Washington. And USC is going to be stronger this year too. But neither of those teams will be able to keep up with the Oregons and UCLAs of the world this year.
Where do you see Washington in 5 years?
In the same state, same city. So.
I heard they're moving to San Antonio. Any truth to this?
Oh, well, you know what? If anyone would like to do it, it's Mark Davis.
David Schottenkirk.
In 5 years, Washington will be clearly the second best team in the Pac-12 North. I think
behind Oregon?
Yes, behind Oregon. I think they pretty much assumed Stanford's role the last few years. I love that hire. They're going to be pretty good this year. Arguably, their front seven is as deep and as good as anybody's in the country. The schedule's not exactly great. Offensive-wise, they lost a lot. We'll see what they can do. But I think Chris Peterson has a chance to do big things. Some of the most underrated, underappreciated facilities in the country, too. It's an absolutely great facility they got going on up there. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting at the very least. Quickly, my USC preview since Tracer got his Gophers bid and whatever in. But I see 10-2 this year with potential of 11-1. Stanford, second week of the season at Stanford. That's the swing game for me. If they can somehow win that one, I think very possibly they could be 10-0 when they play UCLA, which would be one hell of a matchup considering all the hype coming in with Hundley and my obviously what I said about Hundley earlier as my Heisman pick. I don't think they get past Stanford. I think they lose there, and I think they lose at UCLA. I think they go 10-2, and Steve Sarkisian as a good but not great first year.
I also previewed USC. I know you're gonna love this, David.
I'm gonna hate it. I'm gonna hate it.
I said earlier 9-3. I don't think they win that game at Stanford. I think they always have one road game that troubles them. You've always mentioned Oregon State. I think this year that might be at Arizona, and
Fuck
then.
Get out of here! They're not losing Arizona, for Christ's sake.
And then I don't think they beat UCLA. I did give you the victory over Notre Dame at the end of the year. I hope that counts.
Oh boy! A 5-6 Notre Dame team. How impressive!
Right now, right here, I'll say if USC does not beat Notre Dame, I'm shaving my eyebrows. They have to fucking beat them this year. I will go insane if they lose again to Notre Dame this year.
All right, it's a deal.
You heard it here first.
Speaking of eyebrows, Charlie.
We're not talking Anthony Davis today.
Damn you, Stacking, and your NBA biased. I know you love it. Charlie has the best eyebrow story I've ever heard. That's for another time. But yeah, I look at the schedule for USC. Stanford, they host Arizona State, at UCLA. Those are the only 3 games like losing. They got a dog shit of a schedule here in the middle. Easy road games at Utah, at Washington.
At Utah is not easy, I can tell you that right now. Ask Stanford how they feel about going to Utah last year.
Maybe not easy, but other than Cal and Colorado, it's probably the next easiest road place to play at in terms of team talent-wise. I would agree
Washington
that it's not
State?
necessarily easily, though.
No,
Washington State went to a bowl game. Utah didn't.
True. Mike Leach doing good things
and
out
we all
there.
know Mike Leach will try to score 80 against everybody.
Yeah.
I can't ask Stanford how they feel about playing at Utah because they're not one person.
Yes, they are. They're the Cardinal.
No.
Well, they are a tree. They are one tree. That.
Fun fact. Getting back on topic, Trax, you fuckhead. I'm going to be at USC at Boston College September 13th. I will be blitzed out of my mind, and hopefully it's 42-0 at halftime so I can get out of the shit-ass stadium.
All right, since Travis left us, I'm going to throw my picks out there. Comes down to Oregon and UCLA, and I think Oregon's going to go to Michigan State. They're going to beat Michigan State, and they're going to win their division. They're going to win the conference, and they're going to be a factor in the playoff. So
that game is at Eugene, isn't it?
Or is it?
Yes.
It's
Oregon.
Okay.
It's at Oregon. So
all right.
I mean,
even better.
Oregon's going to have a huge home. I mean, has a home field advantage. That's part of why I don't think that Stanford's going to beat them this year during the regular season because that game also in Eugene. So, Kriens, did you give your Pac-12 picks? No, he's dead. He's dead, folks.
Every time, same time.
We'll come back to that. Everybody get their picks in here on the Pac-12? Then we'll go to the ACC.
I didn't do mine yet.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Oh. All right. Real quick, Oregon, Stanford always seems to be what's going to decide the North. It's kind of reminded me of the Texas, Oklahoma, and the Big 12 South back when that was a conference with a conference title game. That everyone talks about that being the most important game, and then usually one team won by 2 or more touchdowns. So it was a really big game, but frequently not a close game. I think Oregon from the North gets it. I think they've got an easier schedule than Stanford. In cross-division, they play both Utah and Colorado. I think that certainly helps a lot. And then I think Marcus Mariota is going to have a really good year. I think Stanford will be good, but I think they've lost enough guys that they're not going to win the conference. From the South, I've got USC instead of UCLA. 3 offensive linemen back. And this is weird hearing my voice echo through the screen now. I'm going to try to really focus and bear down now. I think Kessler playing well at the end of the year. I think he's going to look good under Sarkisian. Nelson Aguilar and Leonard Williams, talented players at USC. And then the other thing, I'm trying to read my chicken scratch notes here. USC plays Oregon State, Washington State, and Cal from the north. I think those are all 3 games that they should win. Ultimately, I think USC beats UCLA in Los Angeles. I think they find a way to do it. So, and then I've got Oregon over USC in the Pac-12 title game.
How many losses do you have USC having then?
2.
To who?
Lose to Stanford, beat UCLA at home or away. I don't know. It's in Los Angeles, so it's basically a home game for both of them.
Who did Wyatt
think
have
UCLA.
beating Oregon versus who?
Huh?
Oregon over USC in the title game.
Me? No, I had Oregon over UCLA.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Charlie. Okay.
No.
And I kind of agree with Travis. I think UCLA just plays so many. I think they play more teams that are good than USC in terms of conference play. And I just think that I think USC will go 9-3, or UCLA will be very good, but has a brutal schedule and will go 9-3 like the last couple of years.
Marcus Traxler at Pac-12.
Yeah, I think Oregon UCLA meet in the title game, and I think the winner is in the playoff. I'm going to take UCLA. I think I don't know. I'm leaning towards Oregon during the regular season and UCLA in the championship game, but I could really go either way on that. So for now, I'll take UCLA to win the conference championship game over Oregon.
Then David had UCLA versus Oregon, with UCLA winning.
No, I have Oregon winning the conference title game. I have UCLA beating them in the regular season but losing, so they'd both be 12-1.
All right, I've got Oregon over USC, like has been mentioned. I think UCLA's schedule, 4 or 5 different teams there they could beat. I like USC's schedule a lot more, including their easier road schedule. So I like Oregon to get out of there. Everybody here either likes Oregon or UCLA.
If
Big
USC
12 now. You got Baylor winning that conference last year, got their doors knocked off by Blake Bortles, the greatest quarterback of all time. Oklahoma, top 3 team this year. Is it between Oklahoma and Baylor or anybody else you could see there in the Big 12 giving them a run for the top of the conference?
I think you'll be a little surprised to see what Charlie Strong can do there at Texas, but it'll take a couple of years for Texas to really get back into the fold. I agree with you. I think it is between Baylor and Oklahoma, but Oklahoma always has a fuck-up team, so they'll have at least one of those this year, and I'll take Baylor to win it.
I completely agree. Oklahoma usually does have a mistake game, but I look at their schedule. I don't see many opportunities for that. I think this all comes down to November 8th when they play Baylor, that game in Norman. I think Oklahoma goes undefeated. They're in the playoff.
Ballsy. I like it. I do not have Oklahoma going undefeated. I think they win the conference. Here's the baseball stat of the century, of the millennium, lock of the week. Bob Stoops has been the head coach at Oklahoma since '99. Every even-numbered year, he's won at least a share of the conference.
Very good.
So I think that Oklahoma, 3 starters back on the offensive line, 8 back on defense, even with that one linebacker, Shannon, suspended for the year. They get Kansas State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State all at home. I think Oklahoma, like has been mentioned, I think they'll have a couple of games where they screw up and slip up, but it will not be to Baylor or Oklahoma State, and that they win the conference.
Mr. Schottenkirk.
Pretty much everything's been said. I think Oklahoma, I want to say they go undefeated, but I just can't bring myself to do that. I think they lose a game. I think that Oklahoma-Texas can be interesting again. Texas got them pretty good last year. As far as Baylor goes, I think we're going to know pretty soon in the year what they're going to do. If I'm not mistaken, October 4th, they play at Texas, don't they?
Yep.
That's one of the key games. I think Texas is going to have a legit shot to knock them off there. Outside of that, I think it is Oklahoma-Baylor. Give me Oklahoma with one conference loss somewhere that they probably shouldn't have.
Mr. Rogenkamp.
Yeah, I think this is really a perfect scenario for Oklahoma this year, just the way the landscape is in the Big 12. I think they're going to roll. The only hiccup I see is that Red River game, Oklahoma, Texas. It seems like it doesn't matter whether each team is 0 and whatever or undefeated. Anything can happen in that game. It could be 65-13 Texas, or it could be 65-13 Oklahoma. It just, you never know. So other than that, I think Oklahoma's gonna control their own destiny, and I think they're gonna win the conference easily. So
the Red River Shootout every year, the best big game. That's almost never a good
one
game.
loss, maybe two. I do not have them in the playoff as my surprise right here. Oklahoma going with Trevor Knight. I'm not a big fan. He played well against Alabama. I don't think he's going to be all that great. Blake Bell, tight end. Mr. Hildebrand, is that the right call at quarterback?
I think it is if that's what they're doing. I mean, they know more about this than we do. And he played well against Alabama. He's a highly recruited kid. I think his ceiling's higher than Blake Bell. The Belldozer's good at running over guys and being kind of a less effective college version of Tim Tebow. And I think Knight will be good. I don't think he'll be as good as he was in the Sugar Bowl or as some people are expecting him to.
Where do you put the Big 12 here in the hierarchy? You put them at least number 4. Are they better than in the ACC? Losing Nebraska and Texas A&M doesn't help. Are they kind of the conference that you're least interested in? Them in the ACC?
I would say go ahead.
I was just going to say the only reason they're a little less interesting is because there's not a championship game in the conference, but I mean they're still better than the ACC or the AAA, whatever the hell they're called now.
The AAC.
The American.
AAC, yeah, the American. So I think in terms of the pecking order, they're probably 4th.
I would say that. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Or I was just going to say, in terms of conference, I think the SEC and the Pac-12 are really, really, really close. If you want to say one's better than the other, I won't argue too much about that. And then I think there's a gap, and I think the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC are all pretty close together. I think by nature we're probably going to be more interested in the Big 10, maybe as a whole of us, just because some of us are Big 10 fans, and those are the regional games we always get, so we'll frequently know more about those teams. And I think the ACC is probably going to be the least exciting race of the year because outside of, an Old Testament plague, I think Florida State's probably going to win the ACC.
That was what I was going to say. I mean, at least the Big 12 has another team that could challenge Oklahoma to win that conference. You just look at there's nobody that's even close to being as good as Florida State, and so I think that's just what it comes down to. The ACC, the ACC's had divisions for almost 10 years now, and I still don't know which teams are in which divisions, nor do I really care. And they're just going to pick 2 teams at the end of the year. They're going to play in a conference championship, and Florida State needs to win that game to get into the playoff.
All I remember is Florida State and Clemson are in the same division, so they can't both play for the conference title.
That's right.
That's what I remember here.
And isn't Miami in the same division or no?
Miami's in the other one.
They're
the one with
Virginia
Tech.
Tech.
That's right.
Coastal and Atlantic, right?
Yep.
I can't tell you which ones got which
We'll talk plenty of
teams.
Florida State later on, but I want to focus on Clemson and Duke. Can they go on a run here? Can they continue to win 8, 9, 10 games here in the ACC?
Clemson can still win 9 games. Duke, they'll be around, but these 2 teams are not going to be competing for conference dominance like they have been in the past.
I think Clemson will still be good. I think they'll take a little bit of a step back, but I think they recruit well enough and Dabo Swinney's the best coach they've had in 20 years. I guess kind of Traxler talked about this, like 6 hours ago when we started the show. But I think Clemson's in the running for an at-large BCS spot that's actually a really big bowl game, but not called the BCS, but not called the playoff team either. I think Clemson's in a running for that, but they're not as good as Florida State.
But they have at least 3 losses on their schedule that I see: Georgia, Florida State, and South Carolina. So if they're going to take a step back this year, I could see Duke doing something. I mentioned Stanford in the culture before, but what David Cutcliffe's doing out there at Duke has been really impressive. It seems like people are buying into what he's selling there, and I think they have a legit chance to repeat success of last year. I don't think they're going to make it to the title game, but certainly they can make some more noise in a very weak ACC.
Stacken was here yet. I'd like to get his reaction to me saying that South Carolina is my new Clemson.
Oh, that's fine. I love it. I absolutely love it. The old ball coach, he loves it too. So you just go and you take what's thrown at you, and you just go with South Carolina, and the old ball coach will like you.
Spurrier's a shifty one.
And you coach with your shirt off.
Yeah. Gotta get a tan while you're golfing.
I have a problem with it just because South Carolina, Clemson are rivals, but Clemson's just going to have to deal with that.
Now, however, if Clemson goes on a magnificent run, Kriens, you can't go crawling back to Clemson. You got to be done with them for at least a few years.
We're not done with them. We're just retiring their number up in the rafters. We're saying, goddamn Clemson, 2011, 2013, hell of a run.
Kriens is just going to be the hot girl in the bar, and he's going to make his choice at the end of the night based off things.
Yeah.
They get higher with the more drinks you get.
Clemson is a slut, so.
Yeah. You took Clemson out on a date, and now you're never calling her again.
I took Clemson before Clemson was hot.
One and done. One and done.
And done. She's living above the goddamn garage. You won't leave Clemson. Florida State. What do you think of Florida State? I'm pretty sure everybody's going to pick them in the playoff here. If you had to stake your life on one team making this playoff, is Florida State the team?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
I suppose.
Start with Shot and Crick, go to Wyatt. Pick a team to lose to Florida State in the conference title game.
I have Virginia Tech. I think they're going to be stunning, right?
Yeah, boy.
Tell Stacken to quit unbuckling his pants.
I don't think anybody in that division is all that good. Virginia Tech plays Ohio State week 2. That could be a pretty entertaining game. I think they'll have enough to make it to the title game and lose 49-7.
Hey, I told you already, I like North Carolina. You look at their schedule. They have a few challenging games. They're at Clemson. Well, at East Carolina, that's usually a hard enough game.
Loss.
At Notre Dame.
Loss.
And they're at Miami as well.
Loss.
So we can go back and forth. I think they're a 10-win team that plays in that ACC championship game and gets run over.
Who did you have?
North Carolina.
Oh, damn you. All right. Any pants bet you want to put on this at all? You feel that confident?
No, I don't feel confident enough to wager a pair of pants.
Florida Marlins still near 500.
Miami, but technicalities, I guess.
What?
It's the Miami Marlins, not the Florida Marlins anymore. That's retired just like your Clemson tenure.
Who did you think was in the Marlins Hall of Fame?
Yeah, never mind.
Fucking Bobby Bonilla, get the fuck out of here.
Jeff Conine.
Jackie Robinson.
Good old Jeff Robinson.
Hey, the way Giancarlo Stanton is playing, he'll get there one day.
Mike.
His name's Mike.
We're going with Mike Stanton. We're keeping it local. All right, we got Wyatt Rogan Camp, Florida State. Who do you have coming out of that? Whatever.
Them and who for the title game, right?
No, for the ACC title game, which you go to every year.
Huh. Surprise! This might be. I might be all alone. Well, I know I am, but I'm going to put them against Duke. Because I don't think North Carolina or Miami is going to. Well, Miami, what they lose? How many of their players now because of they raped some people or they?
Whoa!
I don't know. But anyway, I think Duke is actually gonna be back in the mix this year. So put them up, and of course Florida State's gonna beat the shit out of them, but that'll be their obstacle.
By the end of that game, Duke will be shitless. Marcus Traxler, Florida State and who?
God damn it, North Carolina. Tell me that. Like you don't believe me.
He's just giving you a chance to change your mind.
I don't want to change my mind. I'm going to hitch my wagons to North Carolina.
I thought you were asleep there. You just bounced off the couch like a goddamn genius.
North Carolina probably is going to go 7-6, but I'm going to take my chances. Here we go.
Is that? Do you have like a big spin wheel that you spin each year to pick who you're going to take from the ACC?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Nathan Stacken.
Yep.
Virginia Tech minus what? Minus 15? Who is it?
Better make it minus 24.
So Florida State, Virginia Tech, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Take him to the bank. Though I'm losing a little faith in Beamer ball here, but
why?
Maybe because he's 100 years old.
Says the guy that has a coach that's, 57, and looks like he's 89.
Oh, who are we talking about?
Jerry Kill.
No, Jerry Kill just doesn't look like a human. He looks like a walrus. He looks like a walrus.
He looks like a fucking dinosaur.
I was going to say he looks like a gopher, but...
Yes.
It's fitting that he coaches the team then.
Over under 1.5 attacks for Mr. Kill this season.
Hopefully under, but...
That's uncalled for.
Nah, that's not funny. Lord, I apologize.
I called for it. David, do it. Thank you. Charlie Hildebrand, wrap it up. Florida State versus...
Virginia Tech. 4 of 5 starters back on the O-line, 3 of top 5 tacklers. I think Schottenkirk said Florida State wins 49-7. I'll give Virginia Tech slightly more credit and say Florida State takes an early vacation and only wins 38-12.
Oh.
yeah, the quarterback situation for Virginia Tech though is not the best. So they'll hopefully ride on defense and special teams.
Michael Vick.
Marcus was good, but Michael was the real key here.
Michael Vick. Here we go.
Yep.
That's it though. That's all that's there or was there.
Tyrod Taylor's their best quarterback. He's the only one that's led them to multiple BCS games.
Yeah, Tyrod was good.
Was Jim Druckenmiller there 20 years ago? Is this right?
Yeah, something like that.
I, too, like Florida State to defeat Virginia Tech from the Coastal, and I have Florida State as my 1 seed in the big tournament. Let's see, Florida State looking to go undefeated for the 2nd year in a row. Trivia question to the group. Hint, it was mentioned previously already. Last team to go undefeated besides Florida State in back-to-back years.
Nebraska?
Years.
94-95, you said, I think?
94-95. Yes, that is true. Besides that, besides Nebraska, the last team before them to go undefeated in back-to-back years.
Miami.
No.
I might need 20 seconds. I can probably figure this out though.
Here's what I'm going to do. Anybody gets it? You get Traxler's Clemson shirt.
No, you don't.
And I'll send you a special edition of the Sports Lounge T-shirts.
Oh, look at there.
I don't have one of those to begin with.
I don't either.
Well, you got to buy them. That's the thing. I bought everybody Tampa Bay Devil Rays hats, and you never wear the goddamn thing. So
I didn't get it. It got lost in the mail.
Get out of here.
very good.
Was it Boise State?
Nope.
Was it Tulane in the late 90s, or was it Marshall?
It was before Nebraska in the mid '90s. Before Nebraska.
Oh, the last team before Nebraska to do it?
Here's a hint. Nebraska is the only team in the last 40 years to go undefeated back-to-back years.
Is it the Gophers?
Nope.
Notre Dame.
Nope.
Was it Barry Switzer, Oklahoma, or Ara Parseghian, Notre Dame?
I got it.
John McKay, USC?
Here's a hint. No, it's Joe Paterno.
Was it?
Penn State, maybe?
Nope.
You don't really know.
Shit.
Was it Army in the 40s?
Nope.
You're just crowdsourcing us. Do you even know the answer?
1969 to 1971. 3 consecutive undefeated seasons.
Ohio State?
Real quick here. Penn State was right before this, so I was kind of right. They were 68, 69.
Very close.
Oh,
Very
you
close. Toledo.
Ah, fucking A. Son of a bitch.
Were they?
It would have been a while till I would have got to Toledo.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah. Were they still the Rockets back then, or what were they called?
We cannot.
They were the Rubbers. Toledo Rubbers.
And to take the same line that Schottenkirk did, I was correct that Army did. I was just 20 years too early on that. Someone did it more recently.
You did have Penn State 68-69. You had Oklahoma 54 to 56. Michigan State's in there. Michigan, the Gophers are in there twice.
Yep.
Notre Dame. Cornell from 21 to 23. Iowa from 21 to 22. Notre Dame as well from 19 to 20. So this does not happen very often. So I like Florida State to make the playoff. I do not like them to win the national title. National title picks. We will start.
Are we going to be the same on everything, Kriens? This is getting eerie.
We spend too much time in the office together. That's what happens.
I guess.
First off, okay, we'll start with Charlie. Your 4 teams, who 1 and 4, 2 and 3. What are they? Let's see here. The Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl will be the semifinals. They'll try to regionalize it somewhat. We'll see if that happens. So we have the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl January 1st. That is your semifinal. Then I believe it's the 12th. You have the national title game. Charlie Hildebrand, your playoff.
I have no conference gets more than 1 team in, and I have Oklahoma not making it. So if we're going to seed these, I guess it would be Florida State against Michigan State in the Sugar Bowl, and then Oregon against South Carolina in the Rose Bowl. And then I've got Oregon beating Florida State to win the national title. Because like you said, it's really tough to go undefeated and win every game 2 years in a row. And I think Florida State's good enough to do it. I don't think they do.
South Carolina, you know how I feel about them now. I like that pick. Oregon, they finally win a national title. And I agree Florida State will not go undefeated. So, Charlie Hildebrand, that is a solid Final Four from you. Yes, I don't know if any teams that you think will be just out. You had South Carolina beating Alabama. I'm assuming Alabama might be your first team out. Oklahoma's out. Would those be the teams that would be the first 2 that would have a gripe?
Probably, and I didn't go through and try to do what every team would be, but I would say someone from the Pac-12 will probably be. I think Oregon will be the only one with 1 or less loss, and then someone from the Pac-12 will have 2 losses, and I would say those would be the first 2 or 3 teams out.
And any undefeated teams there? I don't think there will be.
Not through the playoffs. I think Florida State will be, but I think by the end of the year there will not be any, except maybe Marshall, and I do not have them in my playoff.
Marcus Traxler.
I have both Florida State and Oklahoma being undefeated, and so those are my top 2 seeds.
Florida State's your 1 seed?
Florida State is the 1 seed. They'll be playing in the Sugar Bowl, and you'll have Oregon Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. I have Georgia as my number 3 seed. They would then be playing Oklahoma, and number 4 UCLA to play Florida State. So I have Florida State, UCLA, and Oklahoma, Georgia. I have Florida State and Georgia in the title game. I think Georgia wins.
So
Georgia.
real quick here, just based off the way they've got it set it up, and you don't have this, Traxler, but you've got it like this close to Oklahoma being the higher seed, but unfortunately having to play UCLA in the Rose Bowl.
Right. It would.
Like,
I mean,
just that close to happening.
Well, I did this wrong earlier because I thought about UCLA being the number 2 seed, being undefeated. You know, if you did have 3 undefeated teams, and yeah, there's a real possibility that UCLA would be playing in their home stadium in the Rose Bowl for the semifinals.
They want to regionalize it, like I said. If UCLA makes it, do you think they would go away from the Rose Bowl? Or do you think
I don't know.
Would they be more likely or less likely to play in the Rose Bowl, especially if they're clearly not one of the top 2 teams and there are 3 or 4?
Well, I think if the Rose Bowl has any say in it, they'll want the Pac-12 team in that game, so they would want UCLA in that game.
I think so.
I don't know if they will have any say in that, but I don't know.
You've also got Georgia just almost playing in Atlanta, but having to travel out to
New Orleans.
Where'd you have Georgia?
I have them as the number 3 playing Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl.
On the Rose Bowl.
Okay. Yeah, so it was their home state, but not. Which would be very interesting. I would like to see 2 lower-seeded teams play closer to home than the high-rated team. I think that would be funny and ironic.
Well, if you had Florida State and Georgia playing in the Sugar Bowl, I mean, Florida State, they'd only be, what, a couple hours away?
Yeah. Yeah, they'd both be close.
Let's go Nathan Stack, and what's your 4-team playoff?
All right, I got Florida State against UCLA, and I have LSU against Oregon. I see Florida State and Oregon advancing to the title game. As much as I would like to take the Ducks, and as much as I'm not that confident with this, I'm going to cop out and say Florida State will go undefeated for a 2nd straight regular season, and Jameis Winston will go steal some crab legs to celebrate.
Good call.
Florida State over Oregon.
Yes.
Oregon.
Oregon will be trailing the entire time.
Oregon. I play the Oregon in Oregon.
Oh, look at you.
Wyatt Rogan camp.
Hey, did Paulson do that one with you?
Okay, I have Oklahoma and South Carolina in the Rose Bowl, and then Florida State and Oregon in the Sugar, and I have Oklahoma versus Oregon for the title game, and I have Oklahoma winning the national championship.
Who's your 1 seed?
My 1 seed would be Florida State. 2 Oklahoma, 3 Oregon, 4 South Carolina. Sound right? Hello?
Sounded good to
Florida
me.
State beating who in the title game?
What?
Oh, he had Oregon and Oklahoma
Yeah.
in the title.
Oklahoma over who in the title game?
Oklahoma over Oregon.
Oklahoma over Oregon, if that makes you feel better, Kriens.
Thank you. Mr. Schottenkirk, this is interesting. What do you have here?
My 1 seed is Florida State, undefeated. My 2 seed is Alabama, be undefeated. 3 seed UCLA, 4 seed Oregon. So that puts Florida State against Oregon in the Sugar. Alabama, UCLA in the Rose Bowl. I have Florida State beating Oregon. I have UCLA beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl. I have Florida State winning the national title over UCLA by a field goal.
Ooh.
So Schottenkirk's got what I was saying earlier. You've got UCLA being the lower seeded team but playing at home.
Yep.
That'd be fun to see.
Only because Florida State's not going anywhere. They're not going out west for their first playoff game as the 1 seed.
You have Florida State undefeated for the 2nd straight year.
Correct.
And I mean, one thing that'll definitely be a case in this, if you have the championship game at Jerry World, that'd be reasonably close for Alabama, Oklahoma. I'm sure Florida State, if they make the title game, they'll travel well. So it is a pretty good location for a lot of the teams that are involved.
Didn't you see the commercial already? We know Arkansas won it all this year.
Arkansas, national champs. Bert Bielema, you're the national champ.
Bielema.
National champs at firing their coach after 2 shitty seasons.
Well, just get on.
Pity laugh, Marcus.
Just get on the motorcycle and ride off with a fellow athletic department employee and have an affair.
Ride right back to Louisville.
Ride it right to Louisville, neck brace and all.
Yeah. Intercourse on the motorcycle.
I've got Florida State as my 1 seed facing Wisconsin as the 4 seed out of the Big Ten. I've got Florida State winning that one in the Rose Bowl. And my 2 seed's going to be LSU from the SEC. I think they're going to defeat Oregon in a rematch of last year's home or opener for them. So I got LSU defeating Florida State. LSU is my national champ.
Oh, I love that. That'd be great.
Put a lot of faith in a young quarterback, running back, and receiver. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen. I think they've got the talent to do it, but they'll need to gain the experience quickly.
Go Tigers. GEAUX.
If that happens, I will bow to you in astonishment because that's ballsy.
The exact 4 or just the national title?
Just if LSU if they win the title, no matter who they play, no matter how it goes, I'm gonna bow to you because that is really really ballsy.
I'll give you this, and I'm not saying it can't happen or even that it's super super crazy, but if LSU makes the 14 playoff, I will consider buying and sending you a very very cheap Clemson T-shirt. Not saying I will. I'll consider it though.
How about a hat?
Or a hat.
It has to be pre-worn so it's worth more. So you go do a marathon around town and don't wash it and then send it.
Sure, Dabo Sweeney wore it to church.
No, that's a sin to wear a hat to church.
Why can't we wear hats inside of buildings? When did this become a rule, and why does it happen?
I don't know. I was just throwing it out there.
What are you talking
It's
about?
okay
I wore
for
my
girls.
10-gallon hat to class all the time.
You lived in Hanson Hall.
Yes.
Whatever the hell you want to do in Hanson Hall, livestock roaming the hallways, there are no rules.
No more, though.
Even the
Fun,
chickens chew
some
and
good games. You got A&M at South Carolina. South Carolina, they could shit the bed early here.
It's funny how little we
the
talk
second biggest
about.
game, obviously, is Eastern Illinois at Michigan, or at Minnesota. Boise State in the Georgia Dome. They're home away from home at Ole Miss. Run down of the games here, and then you have a grab bag of thoughts on them. LSU, Wisconsin in Houston. Alabama beat the hell out of West Virginia at the Georgia Dome. Oklahoma State and Florida State at Cowboy Stadium. You got Clemson at Georgia. You got UCLA at Virginia. Northern Iowa at Iowa. North Dakota State at Iowa State. Penn State and Central Florida in Ireland for no goddamn reason. And Ohio State at Navy. Any thoughts?
Where's SDSU Missouri on this list?
At the bottom of the list.
I think Oregon and USD is at the bottom of the list. I think that will probably be the worst game of week 1.
Which of those games are you most looking forward to?
LSU was... Sorry, go ahead, Schottenkirk.
I think it's got to be LSU, Wisconsin. For Kriens' LSU Tigers, that's one game I would be rather concerned about them losing. especially if you have him going all the way. Fournette, like we talked about really early on, is an absolute man. He's going to be, let's put it this way, I have him on 1,500 yards this year. I think he's that good as a true freshman. I think you're going to be amazed when you see him in action. Other than that, Clemson, Georgia should always be entertaining. South Carolina, Texas A&M, I think South Carolina probably beats them pretty good. A&M's talented but super young. We'll see how they do. I think UCF beats Penn State and Iowa. That's my one kind of upset.
I'm most excited for South Carolina because I've got them winning the SEC and getting in the playoff. I think LSU and Wisconsin will be good for a half. I think LSU will wear down a brand new Wisconsin defense and win like 31-14. I mean, I think it'll be a good, solid game. I think LSU will pull away at the end, though.
I think
and Kriens, you got that as a preview of two teams in your playoff later this year, right?
It's going ballsy. LSU, Wisconsin. Obviously, somebody's going to lose because this isn't soccer. So one of the teams is going to be behind the 8 ball here early. I'm banking on LSU winning that game because I don't know if they can navigate the SEC undefeated. I think Wisconsin loses that and then runs the table the rest of the way. Obviously, they have to, since I don't believe a 2-loss Big Ten team, even if they win the conference, will get in. I think a 1-loss team could from the Big Ten, not a 2-loss team. So,
I've got Oregon and Michigan State, who both play in week 2. I've got both of them in the playoffs, so I'm equally as playing Russian roulette risky.
And it was interesting that David had a pair of, I thought he almost had 2 SEC teams there and 2 Pac-12 teams. But 2 Pac-12 teams, Alabama and Florida State. Pac-12, SEC, obviously the only 2 conferences you could see 2 teams for the foreseeable future getting 2 teams into the 14 playoff.
Yeah, for the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think those are the 2 conferences you're going to be looking at. The Big 12 maybe in an odd year could have 2 1-loss teams if they played each other or a tight game or whatever, and the other team beat just schedule in Alabama and beat them or whatever. But I think it is pretty clear that the Pac-12 and SEC are the 2 most likely candidates to get 2 teams in.
I think it'll be interesting to look at things going forward, and none of us know how this is all going to shake out because we're in uncharted territory here. My guess is that most years there will not be multiple teams from one conference. I think that'll be in every 3 or 4 years you'll get 2 teams from one conference in, and it'll be a big deal. But I think more often than not it'll be one or only one per conference. And we could look back at this 6 months from now, and I might look incredibly stupid, but that's what I'm going to say. Now, the first year, it wouldn't surprise me if they had 2 from one conference in, but I think more often than not, that will not happen.
Does this make the bowl games more important? I think it does. You got the Peach and the Cotton Bowl, former bowls that were big-time deals, less of a big deal now. The Peach Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, I believe, are both on December 31st now. And they're really the 2 biggest, obviously the 2 biggest non-BCS bowls, since we're going to continue to call them that. And they share that December 31st date with the Orange Bowl and the Fiesta.
I think it makes some of the bowls a bigger deal. I think we're going to get to the point at some point in the next few years. I don't know if it'll be 3 years or 5 years or 10, but we're going to get kind of to the point where whatever you want to call them, the BCS games that aren't the playoff games are going to start not really meaning a whole lot anymore, and people won't care, and it'll be playoffs or bust. But that's speculation. We'll have to see how things play out.
You have 5 bowl games there on the first day, December 20th. So they're going to pack you hard and heavy on that first day. New bowl games, the Raycom Media Camellia Bowl in Montgomery that first day. The Miami Beach Bowl on the 22nd at Marlins Park with the green stuff. The Boca Raton Bowl at Florida Atlantic, and the Bahamas Bowl on Christmas Eve down in the Bahamas. So a couple of your newer bowls, teams in newer conferences. What do you make of Appalachian State? Some of these teams, Georgia Southern, making the leap up. We haven't seen that a whole lot here, but we have Old Dominion making the leap up too. Is this a good move for them to do that?
Where the money's at.
I would say, I mean, from a competitiveness standpoint, I would say no. I think it benefits you more if you want to win to be at FCS. But to each their own. I mean, to me, it's just it's a lot more commitment. That's 22 more scholarships you got to fund. You're playing teams that, on the grand scheme of things, people really don't care about. I know that's the case at FCS too, but you have Appalachian State has won the championship before, and I think they probably just looked at it as being a situation where they couldn't really get, any more notoriety, so they might as well move up.
And for the Orange Bowl, slated to be an SEC-ACC matchup, so you're looking at probably the second place teams from that conference heading to the Orange Bowl. Also, Charlie, there's going to be a non-power conference team has to make either the Fiesta Cotton or Peach Bowl. Is this correct? Does this make sense?
That there will. The people are calling the Big Five the Power Five. I'm making a motion right now. We should call the other 5 conferences the Puny Five, and that there will be one every year that will get an at-large spot.
Your schedule, you kind of touched on it.
I'm assuming Kriens thinks Navy's going to take one of those.
Boom! A lot of people like Marshall, should go undefeated. A lot of people are on the Marshall bandwagon. If I'm going out on the limb here, I'm taking Navy. They got the big game against Ohio State here next week. They host the game.
No, it is a neutral site game.
But more so Navy than
yes, that's true.
If they get past that, they're going to go 13-0.
Good luck.
If they don't get past that, they'll go 12-1.
Good luck.
I'll put it this way. I don't know if I'm going to say that they're going to beat Ohio State. If there's a week to do it, it's going to be week 1 when you're playing, like what you said, essentially a home game against a team. Ohio State only returns 1 offensive lineman. Braxton Miller and Carlos Hyde both not playing. I mean, Ohio State, I still think, has the most talent in the Big Ten, but at many times they've struggled against teams they should beat. Ultimately, I think Ohio State's going to win. I hope Navy does, but if you're going to play them and you're going to beat them, I think week 1's the best time to do it. If you're Navy,
they do have a shit schedule.
At Temple, at Texas State, look out. They host Rutgers, Western Kentucky, VMI, the Power. They host San Jose State. They host GA Southern. Loving me some GA Southern, making the trip. Notre Dame, we'll see how that works. At Air Force, at South Alabama, for God's sakes, and then they beat Army again in the worst and most boring game every year in college football. So only 4 true road games, and one's against South Alabama, who should be FCS, and one's against Texas State, and they suck. So get me Navy. Give me a Navy shirt.
Here's something interesting. Let's say Navy splits Ohio State and Notre Dame. Don't care which one. Let's say they beat one of them, though. Good chance I think Navy gets picked over an undefeated Marshall, because Marshall's schedule is just dreadfully, awfully bad. Where I look away, but it's horribly awful bad. So I think that'd be fun to see if a one-loss Navy team with a win over Notre Dame could get in over Marshall, and see if one of those service academies could play a big-time bowl game.
Because I think me and Charlie talked about this, but what would happen, because that Army-Navy game always happens after the BCS is released. What if you have an undefeated Navy team? They'd probably be around the top 10, maybe just out of the top 10. So let's say, craziness happens, a lot of teams have 2 losses. What would they do if Navy undefeated is still considered for the Final Four, and yet that Final Four comes out the week before they play Army?
Gotta wait, I guess.
The dream scenario.
Yeah, they'd have to wait.
This is probably the only year the dream scenario comes out. They have a trash schedule, and they have a game against the top 5 teams. So Navy and South Carolina are my 2 teams. South Carolina, obviously, much more realistic, and Navy, not so much. Final thoughts, if you want to give a surprise team like this, you can, or anything else here. College football for 2 hours. One final fought. Marcus Raxler.
I'm eager to see how this all works out. You've certainly laid out a great plan for a team like Navy. I don't really have a true dark horse that I really do love, but I kind of laid out Michigan as being a team that I think is going to fail to really do what they need to do. I do think that I think Florida is going to be better. They can't be as bad as they've been recently. I don't think that they're going to go to a non-playoff bowl or whatever it may be, but I think that they're going to have to turn things around. Otherwise, this is probably it for Muschamp. So.
Muschamp. Wyatt Rogenkamp. Any dark? First off, before we forget, give us this SDSU preview, Mo Valley preview. NDSU, #1 again. I don't think they're winning the conference. I don't think they're winning the national title. I don't think they're even making the semifinals. Expectations this year are the highest they've ever been for the team with the new indoor facility and the new stadium coming in a couple of years. Wyatt Rogenkamp, give us some knowledge.
All right. Well, I'm pretty excited, obviously, and the Jacks are going to be well balanced this year on both sides of the ball. Special teams, God forbid, can we do something spectacular? But I look for Zenner to have at least 2,000 yards again if he stays healthy. The defense has a number of veterans returning, so I think we'll be probably not on par with like an NDSU defense of the past couple of years, but they're certainly gonna be tough behind the line of scrimmage there. I think the Mo Valley is pretty deep as always. I think UNI is going to be one of the top teams, 1 or 2 in the conference. Other than that, it's going to be a typical grind it out, see who's left, see who's healthy. I think the Mo Valley probably gets at least 2, if not 3 teams into the playoff this year. So SDSU's top 10 team. Hopefully they can live up to the hype again and play consistently and get back into the playoffs, make a run. We'll see what happens.
What would be a good showing versus Missouri?
What would be a good showing in terms of score-wise?
Yeah,
or
if they lose by 3 touchdowns, is that okay?
Sure. I don't expect them to do any better than like a 3-touchdown gap, but I think we will compete with Missouri. I don't think it'll be like a barn burner, 60-0, that sort of game. I think the Jacks will play with the Tigers at least for a half. We'll see what happens after that, but.
I think SDSU is a better team than North Dakota State this year. This is their last chance for a while. But if I'm going to give either team the better chance to win this weekend, I'm giving it to North Dakota State because Iowa State's just dog shit.
I like Iowa State to beat, or Iowa State to lose to North Dakota State. I also like Northern Iowa to beat Iowa. Marcus Traxler, playoffs. You got to win at least 2 playoff games. Would you not agree?
I think SDSU, I mean, they do need to finish in the top 8. They need to be a seeded team, so they're not playing on Thanksgiving weekend. That's got to be a first goal, and then you've got to win. And I think they've got to at least make it to the quarters, which I think in their situation would only require 1 win if that were the case. But I think that this both Wyatt and Nathan mentioned that this is sort of the year for SDSU to make some headway. I think they'll have some pieces still next year, or they'll be able to develop a few after this season. But you've got Sumner and Zenner and still a pretty good defense. You gotta start working on that. So I think 11 games. I think SDSU probably is like 8-3. They have to go to Northern Iowa this year, which has kind of been their really difficult place to get a win. I would say 3 touchdowns. If they can stay within 3 touchdowns against Missouri this week, that would be an accomplishment. As long as it's not 59-20 like it was last year at Nebraska, they should be fine. And I just don't see the Jacks beating North Dakota State this year. So there's the 3 losses I have laid out. They're the same 3 losses they've had for years, and hopefully they don't give away any games that they don't need, because
Missouri State, if we can beat Missouri State, my God.
Well, even at 8-3, I mean that's pushing it to get a seed. So they're going to have to either beat NDSU or UNI, and I would say UNI is probably the one you're more likely to get.
You probably have to win the conference.
Right, you do. Yeah, I mean
6-2.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a national title pick?
FCS?
Yes.
Eastern Washington should be in there. And
I was not impressed by Eastern Washington yesterday. They did not look very good to me.
What
Vernon
happened
Adams,
there
though,
anyway?
is one great athlete.
They have a quarterback who overthrew receivers at every turn. So I don't know what their problem is. I would guess that North Dakota State's going to be in the title game again. I don't know if they win the whole thing, but I just, the closer I get to the season, the less I think that there's going to be a drop off between coaches, and I think that North Dakota State will have a good. I think they may struggle during the regular season, but they'll get in the playoffs and they'll be dangerous. I mean, their biggest thing is having home field in the playoffs, and if they can somehow get home field for most of the playoffs, they're going to be in good shape.
David, do you have any juicy over-unders, national title, anything look good as far as the odds are concerned, any week 1 games that would be good to look out for?
Not a whole bunch week 1 wise. I'm going to be on Wisconsin on the LSU's going to be favored. I'm going to be on Wisconsin quite big in that game. I think at last check LSU was like a 4.5 point favorite. I might be wrong there. There's odds for teams making the playoffs. I've already put quite a bit on UCLA just getting in the playoff. I have them in the title game. They're like plus 250, so that'd be a nice cash. A couple other, taking a kind of a stab in the dark with the Heisman. I said Huntley's going to win it. Odds wise, he doesn't make much sense for me to put any money on. So I put Thomas Tyner, running back, Oregon. Mariota's going to get all the talk. Look out for Thomas Tyner, a true sophomore. Didn't do a whole bunch last year, but highly touted. He's going to have a monster year at 66-1. I figured a few bucks was warranted to put on his way. So we can discuss that next week. More things that I come up with when I look into it this week. But for now, that's it.
All right, 2 hours in. That's our 2014 college football preview. To give you one final rundown, I like LSU over Florida State. Charlie, he likes Oregon over Florida State. Marcus likes Georgia over Florida State. Also got a boner for North Carolina. David likes Florida State over UCLA. Mr. Rogenkamp, you like Oklahoma over Oregon. Show it. And Mr. Stacken, you like Florida State over Oregon as well. So that is the preview and our national title picks, 2 hours long. Next week we will talk.
Real quick here, I got a couple of notes that are worth saying. This is supposed to be sort of funny, so don't feel required to laugh though, because we always need negative feedback to things that aren't very funny. But overall, a couple of things. I think that Nebraska will finish with exactly 4 losses. I think Florida State will be undefeated at the end of the regular season. I think ESPN will do another, is this the greatest football team of all time? And then after they inevitably lose, they will devote all their time to only talking about the SEC. I think Nebraska beats Florida Atlantic by 21 points in week 1. I think the game's close enough at the end that Nick Saban sets a record playing Florida Atlantic week 2, saying that they don't get enough respect and that they're too big of underdogs in that game. And ultimately, I think that South Dakota gets throttled by Oregon, and Joe Glenn in the press conference says that game was such BS, we should have just watched The Simpsons marathon instead.
Boom! I don't know if you want to do that every week, but that was pretty good. It could be like an Andy Rooney closing segment. Right?
Yeah. Anecdotes. And
We'll
quips.
see.
What's the deal with pencils?
Fucking pencils! Nathan Stacken is one to get up early for obscure sports. For reasons I'm not sure. What do we got? This Central Florida Penn State game. What, 8:30?
Yeah, it won't happen. I'm not going to watch.
You're not going to watch that.
Nope.
TiVo.
You'll get up at 3 a.m. to watch golf.
Yeah, just the British Open. I'm not getting up to watch the Barclays or anything on the European tour over there.
The Barclays is held here in America.
Yeah, I know, but they sponsor some tournaments over there, so I think they're based out of Scotland or something. So, no.
Well, with that, that'll wrap up the 2-hour college football preview. We'll go to the NFL, where the payers get paid legally. We'll break it down for Charlie Hildebrand, for David Jottenkirk, for Wyatt Rogenkamp, for Nathan Stacken. I'm Travis Kriens, Marcus Traxler. Where are we going to be at next week?
We'll be live inside the Sports Lounge. Inside.